We are going to start. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mathieu Millekam. I'm a senior security network architect at Spotted. And in this session of this afternoon, we will look how we can tackle security challenges in OT remote access environments. So looking at the agenda, which is jam-packed, we will have a look at why remote access is key for organizations. We are going to check about what the de facto OT remote standard access is as of today. We're going to also look at which kind of vulnerabilities are particularly targeting remote access environments. And then we'll have a look at two use cases, which will dive deeper into the challenges we see with external remote access management. And then also we are going to have a look at how we can make OT remote access more transparent and secure by introducing a new security approach, and then we'll have a wrap-up. So remote access to OT assets is key for operational teams to manage their environments, and it has, of course, multiple benefits. So one of the main benefits is maintenance. With maintenance, of course, you can manage your systems, you can patch your systems, you can upgrade remotely, and of course this is reducing the need for downtime, and it keeps running your operations smoothly. So this is not only key for internal OT engineers taking care of your environment, but also for the original manufacturers who are managing your OT equipment. Troubleshooting is a next aspect or a next benefit from giving remote access. And this allows, of course, for continuous monitoring of your OT assets. And it enables operators and engineers to quickly identify and troubleshoot issues without the need for having an on-site presence. And this, of course, as a benefit, minimizes downtime, and it ensures that any problems can be addressed in a swift way. The third aspect is to avoid truck rolls. This is an economic benefit by offering OT remote access, for example, to a company or to a plant. So you don't need to travel anymore to remote locations for maintaining the environment, and this helps, of course, to lower your operational expenditure costs for maintaining your environment. Next to that, as you maybe know, skilled OT engineers, they are scarce, and by enabling secure remote access on your organization, you can tap into the expertise regardless of the geographical location your company is based at. So let's have a look at the de facto OT remote access standard. So it typically incorporates several key components and layers designed to ensure secure and reliable remote access to your assets. So in this case, you have the remote operator. He's using VPN to connect to his plant site. The session is terminated on the firewall. And this technology, which is called VPN, ensures that the data between the remote party and your assets is encrypted and is protected from unauthorized access. Multi-factor authentication is also commonly used in combo with VPN. Multi-factor is, besides then your user credentials, a second factor. It's like something you have, something you are. And this access is often role-based, ensuring that users can only access the systems and data necessary for their role, respecting, of course, the principle of the least privilege. So once connected and authenticated to this environment, then the remote operator has only access to a jump server. This can be a Linux or a Windows RDP host. And from there on, he can access the environment he should be operating with only the OT application protocols he needs to do his operational task with. So depending on this design, there can be more than one jump host in this environment, of course. For example, if you want to segregate internal versus external access, or even to segregate different vendors from each other in your environment. Multiple benefits to the design. So we already touched IPsec and MFA. So also in this architecture, in combination with a capable next-gen firewall, you can have a host information profile on the remote operator's client. And this can then check on the OS, the patch level, if the firewall is locally enabled, and if, for example, he has received all of his updates. If those conditions, for example, are not met, you simply cannot have access to the environment. Also, protocol isolation is an aspect to it, so you can only allow the protocols that need to be allowed for the remote operator to do his job. Also, you can have a hardened jump server, so those are all benefits of having this kind of architecture. As a drawback, you still need to have a complex you still have a complex east-west segregation between your different cell lines, meaning that's can be a remote conveyor belt or different OT assets sharing the same purpose. And it's also dependent of if your network, of course, is a layer 2 or a layer 3 network. License costs can also be a drawback. So yeah, maybe you need to publish certain applications on that JUMP server. For example, if you're using Siemens and you're using a TIA portal, okay, TIA multi-user license, of course, does not come for free. And also this solution, it still not offers real recording possibilities and also is still difficult to audit. So let's have a look at OT remote access vulnerabilities where companies are struggling with in 2024. Besides then the usual suspects such as weak passwords, shared accounts, poor segmentation. So what we see this year clearly is that there is an uptrend in VPN and firewall related vulnerabilities. So most of those vulnerabilities, they are linked to authentication and authorization bypass or even remote code execution on the firewall or your VPN concentrator. So I'm not going to discuss all those vulnerabilities into detail, but the most impressive one we experienced at Spotted was like beginning of Q2 this year was the zero-day PAN-OS vulnerability, where if the attack was successful, the adversary was capable of running also arbitrary code on the Palo Alto firewall with root access. So definitely not an amateur attack, so it was suspected that a nation state was behind this kind of attack. So how can you protect against that? So it's not that easy, but the best way is to let your firewall and your VPN infrastructure be managed by a security specialist company like Spotted. So we have dedicated people within our SOC who can track these kind of vulnerabilities on a day-to-day basis and instruct also our NOC to take immediate action if certain exploits are found, or even if there are no patches available, we can start remediating actions to lower the risk. Multi-factor authentication is also part of the de facto standard for remote access architecture, but eventually it does not guarantee you that an attacker can access your environment when your credentials are leaked. So what are the challenges here? So basically, MFA vulnerability attack always start with a successful phishing of your credentials. So that's condition 1. So your credentials needs to be leaked, and with credentials, I mean user ID and password. So once obtained, different kind of attack techniques can be used to bypass your MFA protective layer. And one of the most common ones we see in the field is that man-in-the-middle or adversary-in-the-middle attack. So this is a technique where the attacker positions themselves between the user and the authentication service, with the authentication service, for example, being your O365 logon page. Then the hacker uses the credentials of the user and he tries to start, of course, an MFA prompt. So then the service sends back the MFA to the user. The user approves it, and by using certain techniques, the session token can be taken, and this can then be used for accessing the victim's application. SIM swapping is another kind of attack. So this technique relies on social engineering skills in order to trick the victim's phone company to port his phone number to a different SIM card. That different SIM card is then the SIM card of the hacker. So that way, hackers are capable to receive the legitimate SMS communication, for example, for a two-factor prompt, instead of the legitimate user. So if you think that this is maybe far-fetched, so if you remember the Twitter hacks in 2020, compromising the accounts of, I think it was Joe Biden, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and some other high-end profiles. It was done it was an attack based on a SIM swap, targeting a specific Twitter employee who had then back-end access to the Twitter administrative tools, and that is how they took over those accounts. MFA bomb or MFA fatigue, so it has two names, is another technique. Here also the condition is that the credentials of the victim are leaked. And then basically what the attacker is doing, he's overwhelming the victim with a number of notifications, can be even over a prolonged period of time. And then the user, confused by the source, where are these requests coming from, may eventually approve one of the requests. Once he approves, again, the hacker can take the session token, and with the session token, the victim's applications can be reached. So how can you protect against that? I think Jeroen already mentioned in the previous session, security awareness training is very important here, because with security awareness training, you can train your users not to be lured in a phishing attack. And if you can stop the phishing attack, you can also stop the MFA attack. So that's really important. What you can also do is you can make use also of hardware tokens. You can disallow SMS as a two-factor, or even make use of public infrastructure, key infrastructure to make your MFA environment more secure. So which challenges do we see with external remote cell access? So let's have a look at our first use case. So this use case is the use case of the LTE remote access gateway. So sometimes it's hard to protect against solutions that are placed by a third-party vendor in your environment, right? So they place it, the original manufacturer say, okay, if you want to monitor your environment, we are going to place this piece of hardware, and it's up to us to manage it and to use it to control your environment. So the problem here with this kind of solutions is that you have a direct connection up to your cell area with no visibility, and really the remote access gateway is acting as a security backdoor, where the focus is not on the connectivity, the focus is not on the security aspect, but it's only on the connectivity aspect. So also you can imagine if problems arise in those areas where these kind of devices are used, then it's hard to troubleshoot and to pinpoint what the exact root cause is or was if an incident is raised in this environment. Now, how would Spot-it mitigate this? So let me first be straight with all of you. You should try to avoid this kind of connectivity architecture in your OT environments, right? But as you know, it's not always possible to shun this out of your network. So basically, you have two options. So option one is based on a layer 2 solution. So here you will make use of a strict segregation policy by only allowing network access to the equipment the remote operator need to have access to. So this can be achieved by making use of private VLANs. And this makes sure that the remote access gateway that vendor B is using can only access the equipment that he needs to manage in that segment vendor B is responsible for. And for example, he cannot talk to the equipment which is vendor A is hosting maybe on the same plant site. So even if both those vendors are connected to the same LAN switch, you're able to keep this traffic flows segregated from each other. So option 2 is a layer 3 option, and here the remote access gateway's LAN interface is connected to the OT industrial firewall. And by doing this action, you will create more visibility, because all the traffic or the management protocols that he needs to reach into your OT environment, they are filtered by the OT industrial firewall. So hence, traffic can be inspected and can be isolated from the rest of the network. So option 1 was a layer 2 example of remediation. Option 2 is a layer 3 example. So let's move to our second use case, external remote access through E1. So just for my information, how many people have already heard of E1 or have experience with it? Okay, I see a couple of hands, that's good. So yes, E1 use is widespread, and it's used by a lot of original manufacturers for remote access monitoring, data collection, connectivity, troubleshooting of the environment, and even maintenance of their equipment. So how does this architecture look from a high-level perspective? So you have the E1 device, and this is then placed into the factory LAN, and the E1 device will create an outbound tunnel to the Talk2M cloud. It's some kind of connectivity broker. And then you have the remote operator who makes use of his laptop with the eCatcher client installed on it, and he connects to Talk2M cloud, and from there on then traffic can be routed from the client towards devices behind the E1 on the factory LAN floor. So the biggest problem for these kind of solutions are that if they are solely managed by the original manufacturer or the third-party integrator or vendor, they're pretty much black box for the internal staff who needs to run the daily operations at the plant site. So completely trust-based point product model. So when I'm doing security consultancy on OT environments and the word E1 is raised, it can create a lot of emotions. So when I talk to OT automation engineers, They are struggling with the fact that, yeah, okay, they have maybe multiple E1s on site. They know it has a LAN connection, but what is going over that connectivity, they don't know. Maybe there be 5 or 6 E1s in a OT factory LAN which have been installed, and even original manufacturers are using more than one device to manage the environment. So you can quickly get a sprawl of devices. So from the CISO perspective, it's mainly the lack of visibility that plays part in his frustration, because you cannot protect what you don't know, and at the end, he's ultimately liable for keeping security incidents out of his company. So it's like Stefano Nappo, this was a global CISO of the year 2018, once said, it takes 20 years to build a cybersecurity reputation, but only a few minutes of a cyber incident to ruin it. So it's a real problem for CISOs to deal with this kind of architectures. Of course, for the original equipment manufacturer or your third-party support vendor, it's all very beneficial because yeah, they can have their fast remote connectivity to all their assets, and they also can connect to their environment without much of a hassle 24/7 at their own convenience. So what are the security challenges now of this E1 connectivity model? So first of all, and that's a really important one, is that the Talk2M MFA supports only two-factor SMS authentication. So for your knowledge, Microsoft deprecated two-factor SMS, I think, June 2023, last year. So also what I already explained with the MFA vulnerabilities, second factor should be avoided because it's prone to phishing, it's prone to SIM swapping attacks, and also it can be intercepted by emulating a cell tower, which may be a bit far-fetched as an idea, but it's possible. And also SMS is not inherently encrypted. Secondly, you have the E1 firewall, and he offers 4 levels of protection. So you have the standard, high, enforced, and ultra, but the de facto standard is default, and default means no firewall is applied. So this means that out of the box, you place the E1 device, you have your remote operator connecting with this E-client to Talk2M cloud, you do nothing, then access to all the factory LAN is allowed de facto, but also access to the E1 gateway itself. Also, from a firewall perspective, it has no next-gen firewall capabilities, so it's more like an IP table or an ACL-based firewall, so you cannot check on threat and vulnerability detection or subscription to a threat intel feed. It's simply not possible. And also regarding visibility, you put the device in your network and it creates an outbound tunnel. It's also the same security flaw that we saw with the LTE gateway. You create a backdoor tunnel with no access or visibility what goes in or out of your OT remote network. Also an important one is that on the e-clients, you cannot enable host information profile enforcement. So how are you going to deny, for example, a remote operator which has a compromised PC or is not using the same, is not using the good OS, or does not have the right level of Windows patches installed on this device, so you cannot enforce on that part. So how can we mitigate this? By making use of technology, and how can we mitigate this? By making use of processes. So from the technology part, E1 has by default its port 1 always configured as LAN, and its port 4 is always de facto default 1 port. So by interconnecting the E1's WAN and LAN interface to the firewall, you can now better shield outbound communication from the E1 to Talk2M, and you can also filter on those destination endpoints. But more importantly, with the LAN interface connected to the firewall, you will be able to see all traffic that egresses from the E1 towards your factory LAN. So by doing this, of course, you will create better visibility. You create a choke point, so you mean that all the traffic needs to be enforced and need to go through the firewall. And also you can do deep packet inspection on the protocols that you allow on the firewall if you have a next-gen firewall of next-gen firewall capabilities. So drawback here still from this patch or the security mitigation is that also you need to think about your strict segmentation. So still east-west traffic needs to be enforced. This remediation can also be very complex, so it's maybe manageable with 1 or 3 E1s, but what if you have like 8, 10? So it can quickly become a complex solution. And also, that's more a practical problem. You don't have serial protocol support on a next-gen firewall. So if the E1 is equipped with RS-232 card, yeah, you need to place the E1 as close as possible to the OT assets it needs to connect on. So there you have a logistic problem. Are you able to achieve this architecture? How are you going to do that? Maybe you need to adapt the network. So again, complexity. And in the end also, in this solution, you still have no control over VPN, MFA, and certainly no host information profile protection possibilities here. So how can you mitigate then by process, so, or by people? So specifically, if you have management that is done by third party, you should need to train people who can audit your provider. So as a rule of thumb, it should be clearly that, for example, if the vendor cannot offer you MFA support, then you should not allow him access to your environment. So also very interesting to enforce some more control is to ask access to the audit trail tool. So it's there in the Talk2M tenant, so you can see who is connecting and who has done what on your environment. Ask also for a list of people who is connecting to the environment. Are those the people who need to connect on a regular basis, so need to show you the list. They should be transparent also about the firewall rule settings that have been deployed. And also, you need to make sure that clients who have the eCatcher client also have endpoint detection and response enabled and their security and latest security patches installed. Also, E1 access, you should only allow it via Talk2M Cloud because you can also connect it directly to the internet and it's even less secure. Also, in regards of software, you should challenge your integrator and ask them to keep your environment up to date regarding eCatcher VPN clients and E1 firmware. So both softwares, you know, software is prone to vulnerabilities, so they should be updated on a regular basis. And last but not least, develop maybe your own security policy and procedures where you say, okay, those are the requirements that you as a provider or measures that you need to take in order to get access to my environment. So you have something to enforce on your third-party provider or your original equipment manufacturer. So looking back to what I all explained, I think there we need a new approach, and this new approach is called ZTNA. So it's a concept, it's also used a lot in the IT world. It stands for Zero Trust Network Access, but now also we see it more and more being enabled for OT environments. And let me first explain to you what it's not, and that's a common misunderstanding. ZTNA is not VPN plus MFA. VPN and MFA, they are components of that architecture, but they are not defining ZTNA as such. So how can you see if a solution or a framework is ZTNA capable? So I call it the 5 W's and the how. So if you ask those 6 questions, you will surely be able to define or say this is a ZTNA-based solution. So if we talk about the 5 whys, we're talking about who, it's the identity or the persona who needs to connect to your environment. What is the application or the OT assets they need to get access to in your OT LAN? When is the time-based aspect? So you should be able to limit access in time. Do you allow them access 24/7, or can they only do management tasks from a specific time frame, for example, outside your production hours? So this needs to be enforced. Where is the aspect of geolocation? So do you allow them to connect from everywhere? So if your partner is located in the Netherlands, is it normal that they will connect to your environment from China at 2 o'clock in the morning? I don't think so. So you need to be able to detect it, and you also need to be able to enforce it. The why is maybe de vreemde eend, zoals ze zeggen in het Nederlands, in this kind of story. And that's more about the business justification. So very important. So the role of people in companies, they change. So you need to make sure that the people who are still connecting to your environment, they are credited and vetted to gain access to your environment. How is about the source of hardware you're using to access? So it can be a laptop, can be an iOS device, it can be a Linux box. So also there you can enforce what is allowed and not. And on those 6 things, you can then create a ZTNA-based conditional access policy. But of course, it's more than the 5 whys and the how. So I'm going quickly over them. You need to enable least privileged access control in the solution. It should also have next-gen firewall capabilities. That's really important. You should be able to have device and user posture checking. Multi-factor authentication with hardware token support is also important. So not only, for example, SMS-based MFA. And yeah, Pinnacle to a ZTNA architecture is that you should have a piece of software or hardware that is able to record, monitor, and terminate sessions, maybe even in real time. So this is important to see something, someone is connecting to your environment, there is an incident, so that if you want to look back or resolve the incident, you can trace back from what happened in my environment, which components have been changed, so you can go back in time to see what happened at that specific point of time. Also, terminate sessions is an important one. It can be in real time, for example, if there are irregularities. The guy connects from China at 2 o'clock in the morning. You should be able to kill that session as quickly as possible. Also, micro-segmentation is an important factor. And also, you should be able to quickly get information out of the box, where you also can adhere to audit and compliance stuff if necessary. So, due to those new security challenges, of course, companies, they are urged to migrate from VPN-based remote access to a ZTNA-based remote access solution. So here, this is the de facto standard you see here, which we started our presentation with. It's an always-on solution. Firewall rules are needed. You have your jump servers. Manual session management is still needed. So we need to transpose this model to a model which is more ZTNA-based. And with this ZTNA-based solution, I mean, yeah, it's a trust-brokered architecture where you can manage policies and identity based on context, and then grants access to those specific resources at specific times. In this kind of architecture, you also have a gateway. So depending on which vendor you talk, it gets a different name. Sometimes it's called a ZTNA gateway, can be called a critical service gateway. It's this component in your network who will also do, for example, the recording of sessions and where you can do session kill. And this gateway establishes then connectivity. It communicates with a trust broker. Most of the times it can be a SASE-based solution, but it can also be a component in your network. And this is specifically managing your VPN connectivity, your MFA, everything which has to do with identity and access management is handled over there. So to wrapping it all up, because I think we're almost there. Yeah. How can you secure or make your OT access environment more secure? So definitely you should eliminate those unmonitored backdoor accesses, as you did take control over your environment by creating, again, more visibility. I think education and training is a very important one. So you need to ensure your teams understand the importance of security, but also they should adhere to the best standards that are in use for managing an environment as such. Also, monitoring and audits is an important one. You should continuously monitor and audit your systems and vendors in order to identify potential issues. And if possible, try to migrate from a VPN to a ZTNA-based approach, because it brings more than the traditional remote access environments which we have discussed. You can have context-aware least privileged remote access, you can have recording activities, and you always have best of breed encryption and best of breed two-factor authentication. So to this, I come to the conclusion of my presentation. So talk to us regarding your OT remote access challenges or even your OT journeys, and at Spotted we can help you to implement a ZTNA-based OT access architecture or even remediate your current environments. So thank you a lot. Thank you for having me, and enjoy the remainder of the day. Thank you.